Okay, our next panel is very exciting and talking about new technologies, artificial intelligence. Everybody's talking about, will AI transform life sciences and how is it going to be used? So we're living in a time when AI doesn't compete with human endeavor, it elevates it. And nowhere are applications more remarkable than in life sciences, where digital transformation enabled by AI and machine learning is affecting virtually every aspect of the value chain and bringing us closer to the future of health. Applying AI to big data in the life sciences can help companies reshape business models, streamline biopharma manufacturing, and enhance everything from cognitive molecule research and clinical trial data flow to self-healing supply chain applications and product intelligence. So I want to call up our next panel. Our moderator is Audrey Greenberg, the founder of the Center for Breakthrough Medicine. And our speakers this morning are David Latshaw II, CEO and founder of BioPhi, Irene Rombel, CEO and co-founder of BioCurie, Walter Witchey, the Associate Professor of Radiology at the Perelman School of Medicine, UPenn, Edward Kim, Associate Professor of Computer Science at Drexel, and Matthew Stamm, Associate Professor of Electrical and Computer Engineering, also at Drexel. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nancy, and good morning, everyone. I'm Audrey Greenberg. As you can see on the screen, I don't know if we all need to go through our titles, but maybe a quick introduction. Founder of the Center for Breakthrough Medicines, which was sold to SK Pharmteco about a year ago, and today is actually my last day. So moving on to greener pastures. But I would like all of our panelists to introduce themselves and maybe give a little background on what AI is in particular for their company, how they got into it, and how they're transforming life sciences in Philadelphia and around the world. So why don't we just go right down this line here.
Hi, everybody. My name is Walter Witchey. I'm an associate professor of radiology, and I'm also associate vice chair of research IT in radiology. And so one of my roles is to think about how we can advance radiology in terms of the technology. And so integration with artificial intelligence is one of the things that we're thinking about. We're thinking about how we can implement artificial intelligence as clinical decision support tools in the practice of radiology. And if you think about the number of AI tools that are licensed by the FDA, there are now over 750 FDA-approved softwares and medical device softwares that are available for medicine. The vast majority of them are in radiology, but many of them are not being used in the clinic. And so one of the things that we're thinking about is how we can better integrate AI in the clinic. How can we build trust among physicians who are using artificial intelligence? How can we take old infrastructure from hospitals and integrate AI with it so that it can read or stream data sources from different locations? And how can we change the practice of medicine using these artificial intelligence tools? So those are just a few of the things that I'm thinking about.
Good morning. Is the mic working? Yes, so I'm Irene Rombel, the CEO of BioCurie. So 3 years ago, I had an epiphany. So I saw that there was a huge unmet need in cell and gene therapy, nucleic acid process development and manufacturing. So, there was a conundrum. How do we solve this big bottleneck? And there was this beautiful convergence of technologies. So on the one hand, we've got large amounts of data coming in through things like high throughput platforms, sensors, omics, patient data, et cetera. Then we've got a nice maturity of AI and other tools that were starting to come to fruition. And then, of course, the culmination of decades of research in cell and gene therapy, where we're seeing this wonderful clinical data. So with this convergence, I thought, well, we can marry these and leverage the AI to turn the information into actionable knowledge. So I founded BioCurie, and then I discovered that, oh, we don't have large, big, beautiful data sets. We've got small, sparse, crappy data sets. So what do you do with that? Conventional AI isn't going to work. So we had to actually invent a new platform technology, which we call mechanistic AI. And that allows you to leverage all this data using AI for data-driven decision-making, but with a lot more nuance, pulling in decades of knowledge in biology, chemistry, and physics on top of the AI. So that is what we've had to do, and it's quite different from things like large language models, but it just shows you that there isn't a one-size-fits-all solution for everything. It's going to be very much dependent on the application and the nature of the data, and also the risk involved. So I think that's something that we'll be talking about this morning. Thanks.
Hi, everyone. My name is Dave Latshaw. I'm the CEO of BioPhi. By way of background, originally at Johnson & Johnson, and was responsible broadly for artificial intelligence from discovery up through commercial. And while I was there, I noticed that there was, in my opinion, an overemphasis of capital being deployed in discovery. And there was a large opportunity to look for artificial intelligence applications post-discovery up through commercial approval. So I started BioPhi, and our goal is to tackle what we see as these grail technologies for pharmaceutical companies. The first that we're looking at right now is how do you completely automate regulatory compliance and the law when you're a large multinational global pharmaceutical company. Very difficult when you have over 50,000 operating procedures. You have to harmonize this across many regulatory bodies. So we're looking at those things now, and we're tackling these things one by one. Today, I'd like to give you perspective on artificial intelligence outside of the development or the discovery space, thinking about what other applications there might be, because there's a lot of value to be had in the more immediate term, as opposed to the long-term promise of all these technologies that are being deployed in discovery.
So, hello, everyone. My name is Edward Kim. I'm an associate professor in the Department of Computer Science at Drexel University. I am a traditional computer scientist. I started with computer vision, medical imaging back with my PhD. I did sort of the deep learning trajectory, but I always found that there was something missing in that space. So in 2017, I did a visiting position at Los Alamos National Lab with a neuroscientist, really looking at sort of the intersection of neuroscience and AI to see if we can sort of get any inspiration from how the brain works. That led to several grants, one NSF Career Award in 2019 in Neuro-Inspired AI, then 2021 DARPA grant using medical imaging in the POCUS space, which is point-of-care ultrasound. Most recently, I've been very intrigued with the sort of progression of the large language models since a couple of years ago. And I guess in my sort of history in AI, I really haven't been excited, I think, about a lot of the new developments, except for this one. I think sort of the generative AI space has really essentially changed the game, I think, in terms of sort of capabilities and scale, that what we're able to do. And even if you think about like ChatGPT, it's only like 2 years ago. The fact that I have in my home, in my garage, a system that can outperform GPT, that was released 2 years ago, is just incredible to me. And so that's sort of the space that I'm looking at. What kind of capabilities are unlocked by the generative AI platforms of today?
Hi, I am Matt Stam. I am an associate professor of electrical and computer engineering and an affiliate professor of computer science at Drexel University. I work in an area of AI security called multimedia forensics. So how do you detect fake, manipulated, and AI-generated images, video, speech, and just other signals? In a broad sense, I'm interested in novel aspects of AI security, and I think this has a tremendous amount of implications in the biospace. Not only how you can induce incorrect outputs, how if you're using things like LLMs, you might be able to exfiltrate proprietary data. I think as we start to adopt this extremely powerful technology to broad scale, we need to step back and also think about what are the many new ways in which we need to make sure that what we're doing is going to protect personally identifiable information, privacy, ensure that we're not making decisions on the basis of fake data. One of my colleagues is working a lot on identifying falsified and manipulated data in things like NIH grants. So there's a large number of falsified Western blot images. These are things that are not purely an academic exercise. As we go to make investments in drug discovery and things like that, if we're making decisions on the basis of falsified information, this can have tremendous implications in terms of financial consequences, financial consequences and patient outcomes.
Great. Dave, why don't we start with you? At BioPhi, you use AI models to basically predict outcomes or come up with hypotheses about how successful things may be or not be. How did you use AI in the development of the breakthroughs that have occurred over the last couple of years to really preface the work that you're doing at BioPhi?
Sure. So we were actually in an interesting position because we started 5 years ago before everybody became really interested in the space, when ChatGPT came out. And as Audrey mentioned, one of the things that we're working on in terms of what we see as a grail for pharmaceutical technologies is being able to understand whether or not a drug is going to be successful in clinical trials before you even start. In order to do that, you have to naturally look at the structure of clinical trials, outcomes over the entire history of execution of those. And every clinical trial is different, every structure is different, every endpoint is different, every patient population is different. So it's not something that's very ripe for traditional machine learning techniques. Because of that, we had to look at how do you condense that into something that a machine can understand. And we're already sort of working in the NLP space, natural language processing space, before the generative technology became very, very popular. So that, I guess you could say, accelerated the complexity with which we were able to manage that information. So the key takeaway here, I think, is that regardless of where you're looking at in the discovery or development space, the dimensionality, the complexity of the information is very, very high. Sometimes it's based purely on text. Sometimes it's multimodal data that's spanning maybe 30 different types of data. You have to be able to use architectures, models that can interpret a lot of different types of data, as opposed to if you're looking for something a little bit more simple, that might be just looking at predicting something sequentially that happens in time. I think that's a kind of key foundation for operating in this space.
Got it. Irene, one thing that has been so interesting to me, having worked in cell and gene therapy manufacturing, is the above-the-fold stories that are in the Wall Street Journal about the cost of these therapies. $3 million a dose in the case of some gene therapies, $500,000 a dose for the case of cell therapies. We all know it costs over $2 billion, can cost over 10 years to successfully commercialize a drug. What are you doing within your company in the process of manufacturing some of these cell and gene therapies that will help to reduce the cost and complexity of the process?
Yeah, so in terms of where to have the biggest bang for your buck, it's going to be during process development when you're developing the optimal recipe for each cell and gene therapy. So you develop models to predict as I said, the optimal conditions to produce each therapy in a safe, robust, potent, efficacious manner, and getting it right first time is imperative, because today the paradigm is pretty much hit or miss, very labor intensive. So that's where a lot of the cost comes in. And there's also a high failure rate because a lot of these therapies are very nuanced. So it just takes one step to derail the entire batch, and a batch of an AAV can cost several $1 million a pop. Or in the case of an autologous cell therapy, it's that patient whose life depends literally on that therapy and getting it right. So there are really no second chances here. So again, it's that right first time manufacturing. Of course, once you get the algorithms and the software during process development, the same algorithms can be used during manufacturing as part of the control strategy. So, for example, making sure that each batch stays on track, or to do things like root cause analysis. And ultimately, we're moving towards using the AI models and software for what's called Biopharma 4.0. So that's also called smart manufacturing, where you try and take out as much of that hit or miss labor component as possible. So essentially, it's all a very autonomous process with humans controlling it, but not necessarily doing each step, because there's also a lot of robotics involved, and that takes out a huge amount of the cost. Getting rid of failures, increasing efficiencies, getting contamination out of the way. So, I've got pictures where you show what state-of-the-art manufacturing and cell and gene therapy looks like today. We've got, a lot of people in, all white clothing with, it's looking very technical. They look like they're doing very, great SOPs. Everything's very professional. But you need a whole giant team of people. Each person's got a PhD, and the other thing is that it's very nuanced. So what I've learned from, some of the very seasoned manufacturers of cell and gene therapy is it's very dependent on the operator. So you might have Bob on one day who's fantastic, and then you've got Jim on, the next day who's maybe not so great. And there's that operator error. We cannot have advanced therapies dependent on the operator. So again, that's where the smart manufacturing will ultimately greatly reduce the cost of manufacturing.
Yeah, we don't want any $3 million blown batches where someone's life is on the line waiting for a therapy. And certainly at the Center for Breakthrough Medicines, we were sort of a digital-first CDMO, and we're trying to find our way around data sets whereby we're not only using information that's produced inside the manufacturing suite, but all the information in the ERP system around the manufacturing suite. How many vacation days did an operator take this year? Things that you don't think would predict particular outcomes, but may. So let's just shift a little bit to some of the institutional aspects in our academic institutions. Digital imaging, it's so interesting to me how you can use AI to possibly determine something that an eye or a person couldn't determine. So can you talk a little bit about, Ed, what are you doing specifically within medical imaging and diagnostics? And what advancements can we expect sort of as patients or possibly as investors that are putting their money in this space to determine the future of healthcare and possibly eliminate the false negatives that are occurring within the cancer space and otherwise?
Yeah, so maybe I'll touch first on some really exciting innovations that are occurring in the field, and then discuss how you would go about implementing these innovations in the context of a health system. So first, I think one of the most exciting things that I'm seeing on the horizon is the development of vision language models. So you may be familiar with GPT-4 or Llama, or Meta's Llama model. These are large language models. You can also now show them a picture and ask them, what is this a picture of? Or you can ask them to generate a picture using a text prompt. So this is a type of AI vision language model. It has great applications in the field of radiology in medicine, because we work with pictures all the time. So for instance, if we have a CT scan or an MRI scan, that data can be automatically quantified directly using an artificial intelligence. For example, a vision system could compute the size of the liver, or how much fat was in the liver, or how much calcium is in the aorta. And then these quantitative metrics can be automatically put into a report, a clinical note. Now, a physician could also ask a question, has there been a progression of disease between this previous scan and this scan? And that's a kind of query answer problem that a chatbot is capable of doing. So that's the type of technology that I would love to see implemented, and radiologists really trust these systems within the next 5 to 10 years. Now, a kind of a separate challenge is how do you actually go about deploying a vision language system or other computer vision system in a large hospital? So one of the things that we did recently was try to figure out how we could take all of our unenhanced computed tomography scans and run them through an AI vision system. And so this was a significant challenge for a number of reasons. First, it had involved a number of different stakeholders across Penn Medicine. It required people in IT. It required physicians who were radiologists who understood how the data was being acquired and how to interpret the data. And it also acquired downstream stakeholders, physicians such as hepatologists, but also patients, to be able to trust and interpret the results that were coming from radiology. And so we built a team of people who were all interested in solving this problem. And I think one of the biggest things that helped was at the leadership level, there was great support for us to be able to do this. Without leadership saying, we're really interested in you all taking this risk to implement this type of approach, there would have been discordant information being passed between teams, and there wouldn't have been a clear vision about how we were going to go about implementing this in the field. But now we have one of these systems up and running. It's an AI orchestrator. We built it in-house. It's open source. We process thousands of imaging scans a month, and we generate information, quantitative data about our patients. And I think one final thing that I'll say is that at Penn Medicine, one thing that we've been able to do is really capture this concept of precision medicine in radiology. So you may be familiar with precision medicine in the context of drug design. In radiology, what it means is if we measure a liver, how much fat is there, or how big it is, or so on and so forth, how do we say, in what way is this patient different? Is their liver larger, or is their spleen larger than the average patient? And we take into information factors like their age, their sex, and other factors. This is applying precision medicine concepts in radiology, and AI is exquisite at doing this. So it's been very helpful.
Fascinating. I'm excited for the future of AI, certainly, in diagnostics. And Ed, maybe you can talk about that a little bit as well, the work happening at Drexel, and how is it going to improve perhaps patient outcomes?
Yeah, I'm actually incredibly excited by this panel because I think it sounds like you guys are in my head as well. Because so what I'm incredibly excited about are these vision language models, because I think, you know, being in this space for several decades, I remember, like, maybe just two concrete cases. I just remember, like, you know, for the past 19 years, I've been trying to do document analysis. You know, basic, like, look at a PDF, look at a publication, extract the text. But it's not that easy because there's like figures, there's images, there's like all these different modalities within the unstructured data, right? And so traditionally what we as a computer scientist would do, we'd build these very specialized models, one for sort of the text, one for the vision, one for line graphs, one for the flowcharts. And so you would have these individual models that can't really, they're good at narrow tasks, they can't really generalize. And like just the other day, I put one of those off-the-shelf, you know, released, the Quen model was released like a few weeks ago. I put it on my machine, and it far surpassed anything that I've done in the last 19 years. And so, like, what I'm incredibly excited about is, like, I think if you think about like the bar rising, I don't think that's the right analogy. I think what's happening is the ground is moving, and so like the barrier to entry to get these things working and working well is incredibly low at this point. And I forget, maybe Alistair said this earlier, but like I think there's a gap now between sort of the technology and the applications. Actually, I don't know who said that earlier, but like we as technologists are looking and we're building these tools. We're like, this is incredibly interesting, and oh, it was the internet analogy, and I think like there really is this gap between like, oh, what can we now do with this technology versus like you know, so you build it and they will come type of mentality. So anyway, all to say is that at the moment I'm working with an NIH SBIR project to do large-scale information extraction. So maybe this goes to the second analogy. Like if you think about unstructured notes, PDFs, that sort of thing, you know, something like I came across this note. It was like RTC injury PT3X4, and I put this through a number of different systems. I had customized like these NLP extractors, and it was incredibly difficult. I had to do sort of disambiguation. I had to do sort of this acronym, you know, matching, and it just didn't. It worked for that one case, but it wouldn't generalize. And again, sort of the other day, I put it into one of these off-the-shelf chat bot models, and it got it immediately, and it knew what the context was and all of that. So I think like at this moment, I feel like there's an unlocking of capabilities across the sector where you can do information extraction and structuring at scale. And so once you can do that, then you can have extreme precision medicine around like for this particular person, extract all that data, put it in a database, and do some interesting work. So.
Fantastic. And on that note, when someone extracts all my personal data and puts it in a database somewhere, how concerned should I be, Matt, about protection of this information from counterparties that may use it to my disadvantage?
Well, there's a lot of ways that information can be used and misused. One thing that everyone should be cognizant about, and this isn't an area that I work specifically in, but is in kind of the broader area of AI security, is if you're using information to train a large language model, there are techniques that can be used to reproduce the training data. So if you have kind of a walled LLM, if you're interacting with something like ChatGPT, if you're not using the paid version and you explicitly don't tell it, don't use this as training data, it's using that to refine its outputs and improve itself. However, there are techniques that you can use to say, hey, let me reproduce some of this training data. And that has a lot of implications because now you can de-identify patient information or leak other personally identifiable information if you're not careful and intentional about what you're doing. So in some ways, this isn't so dramatically different from when in the past we've had to think about protecting PII, things like that. However, it's a new modality or a new way we need to think about this. And I think that's just kind of a general thing around AI and ML. In some instances, it opens up new security problems. In other instances, it just is an existing problem in a very different form and scale that we need to think about. Like I mentioned earlier about falsified Western blot images, things like that. That's been going on for as long as we've been collecting these. However, we can now use generative AI to synthesize this data. And techniques that you might look for in the past is this like duplicate content within a common image. That won't work. You have to use other tools to say, was this synthesized wholesale? It's not a new problem, but a new way of accomplishing it that Ed has said lowers the bar to entry for both positive and malicious uses. And maybe the last thing I'll say is, my role is often to think about what are the bad things that can come from this. But I do not think that should be the overarching message. AI is a tool. It's like a car, right? You can use a car to get across the country in a way that in the past it might take a month and some people might die, right? Like on the Oregon Trail. You can deliver an organ for a transplant immediately with this. But you can also use it to run over a pedestrian. It is the responsibility of the user to use it well, but the upside of using this is so high and the barrier right now is so low, we really should seize this moment.
Yeah. So let's have a broader discussion right now about how AI is impacting life sciences. I went to a panel on Saturday down at Penn, and it was so interesting to hear outside of life sciences how AI is being used in SEC filings, analyzing investment information for the Department of Defense and procuring weapons and machinery. It was quite fascinating, but in life sciences, it's also quite interesting. It's impacting our lives, our family, our health, our longevity. So in this broader discussion, can we just talk a bit about, and I invite everyone to talk about, how do you envision the future of AI over the next, let's say, 5 years, which seems like a lifetime, right, in AI, given the pace of change, and where do you think it will have the biggest impact and create the biggest significance for our field? And I invite all of you to participate.
I mean, I can start off. I'll speak maybe a little bit more broadly and focus in on pharma and biotech. So if you look at the state of these artificial intelligence models today, you heard from Edward, that the floor is rising. Things are getting more sophisticated rapidly. For example, today, OpenAI, one of the leading developers of these larger models, has what they call their dev day at, I think, noon today. Generally, when they do this, there's some sort of relatively large step forward in the sophistication of these models. I was having a conversation yesterday where I was talking about one of these things, and I realized it had only been maybe a year since it came out, but it felt like 10 years ago because the field is moving so ridiculously fast. Now, If you think about what that looks like and the implication for how this technology evolves over the next 5 to 10 years, the sophistication is probably going to be unimaginable. I don't believe that the way that these models are structured today is what they will look like in 5 to 10 years, but the genie's out of the bottle. Everybody recognizes the value that these things have created, and the economic incentives to push the boundary and get it right are massive, probably larger than anything else in recent history. So when that happens, you can anticipate that these things are going to be far more complex and far more capable than you could probably imagine. What that means broadly, and then for pharmaceutical development, is that the way that we operate, the way that we do business is going to be completely different. The amount of individuals needed to accomplish a particular task is going to drop drastically. Today, that model is going to look like people using artificial intelligence as a partner to be more efficient, and as it becomes more sophisticated, unfortunately, it'll likely displace people that aren't willing to use it as a tool and make it a part of their everyday work. That will drastically shift the way that we operate. The upside to that is that you can expect significantly lower costs, you can expect faster timelines, you can expect the development of new drugs that will get to patients faster than they ever have before. It's going to be an interplay between where does the technology fit along with humans in that process? And I don't actually have an answer for that, because I don't think anyone does, but it's something that we actually have to keep the pulse on very actively, because it will change very, very quickly.
That's humans in the loop, or what's the phrase that's used to describe?
Yeah, humans in the loop is how most of this is done today. You probably don't want to automate decision-making in pharmaceutical and drug development and leave it all completely up to an AI. So what you do is you allow it to suggest decision-making paths in a more effective way, and then you have a human at the last checkpoint before the decision is made to say, is this a good idea or not, and then allow the human to make that decision. As the accuracy and sophistication of these models goes away, you can anticipate that there will be less and less human-in-the-loop activity, because it will be validated to be constantly making right decisions.
Yeah, so that's actually a Biopharma 5.0 when you combine 4.0 with the human, which is critical. And that's something that over the years I've discovered, that you cannot replace humans. And in fact, one of my favorite sayings is, AI won't replace scientists, but scientists with AI will replace scientists without it. So that's it's incumbent on all of us to I'm a molecular biologist, well, actually I'm a biochemist and molecular biologist by training, but like Audrey, I've become quite proficient in AI and data over the last few years. So I think, again, it's up to us to stay on top of that field. On the topic of the biopharma industry, and of course, we can't think about the biopharma industry without thinking about regulation and the FDA. And I'm very, very happy to say that the FDA, led by especially Robert Califf and Peter Marks, et cetera, have been very proactively on top of AI, staying abreast of the field and being welcoming of input from the industry, because they see it as a force for good. And in fact, last year, the FDA put out 2 white papers on AI in development and in biopharmaceutical manufacturing, and there's going to be a guidance that's coming out later this year. And they've welcomed, again, input from thought leaders in industry to make sure that everybody's on the same page, and that we've got some guardrails that are intelligent, that allow us to use AI, but in a very responsible manner, where human health is preserved at all cost. So that's one thing. The other thing is, I think you mentioned that most of the investment in AI in the pharmaceutical industry has been for discovery, and as some of you have been following the numbers, the ROI has been pretty horrible, frankly, because discovery is a bit of a crapshoot, and the biology is very, very complex, as we all know. So, money continues to pour in, and we'll see how that works out for them. But I think we're most likely to see the biggest tangible benefit when it comes to things like development and manufacturing, where you can get to quicker impacts, quicker metrics, as opposed to waiting years and years before to see if your AI models could outperform regular, high throughput screening or whatever, CombiChem, et cetera. So yeah, that's what I believe will be the case. Likewise for things like FDA filings, where I think using AI is a brilliant application.
Anyone else have a comment on life science and AI? Otherwise, we can start talking about what do we think the biggest challenges are for making this ultimately be successful? Yeah.
One quick comment. I think one of the biggest things that we'll need to pay attention to is how regulation affects this space.
Right.
At the moment, we're at a time where the focus is basically on just unbounded discovery. Well, we're probably in that time, but there have been a number of governmental organizations at the federal and state level that have started to say, hey, let's think about what we're doing here, sometimes very intentional, sometimes a little bit of overblown, but there are important consequences to what we're doing in general, and then as we move to a space like bio, there will be significantly greater implications. Regulation is coming, and that will probably be one of the most important factors for adoption. And shaping how that regulation is formed now from people who understand both the bio, the health aspect, as well as the AI aspect, it is a crucial time if you have that knowledge and skills to shape it so that it moves forward in a positive direction.
Got it. What about you? What do you think the biggest challenges are or consequences for our industry?
Yeah, so I think there are more than a few challenges. One thing I wanted to talk a little bit about was trust and accuracy of the models. Right now, the accuracy of the models in medicine for clinical decision support is not great. It's 70% accurate or less for general question answering. And this, we're talking about answering simple questions related to human health, but not more sophisticated problems like looking at a picture that was obtained with an MRI scanner. So there are a couple issues that need to happen, I think, to kind of resolve that. First, the models themselves have to get more accurate somehow. Now, I think one way we can build accuracy is to address issues of distribution shift. So distribution shift is a term that emerges in this AI space where when you train a model on one type of data, but then apply that model to another type of data, the model deteriorates in accuracy. And this happens all the time in the healthcare space because people are training models on white men or white men from San Francisco and not underserved communities and children and other types of places where this type of data is necessary to train the model.
Women.
Women, of course. So I think to improve accuracy, we need to address this problem of distribution shift somehow. And there's some solutions to that, which we could talk about. Another issue is just the limited or scarcity of health data that is available to train on, period. That actually we're kind of approaching the limit of what one hospital or one multi-institution center can provide to an AI model to train it. So we're seeing an upper limit on the performance of these models because we don't have enough data. We actually need more data in the healthcare space. So there needs to be solutions that try to integrate data across institutions, better curate it, better label it. I think one other thing I will add is this problem of like, what is an ethical model?
Right.
So, I think we're all familiar with the concept that we ask GPT a question, but it generates a response. It's very confident in its response, but also it's just wrong.
Yeah.
So this problem of what is an ethical model needs to be resolved somehow. How does the model address uncertainty around its prediction and communicate its uncertainty to you? That builds trust as a user in these systems.
Brilliant.
So
Yeah.
following in on that, so it sounds like you've got the small sparse crappy data problem as well. In other words, it's really hard to get those numbers in pure data terms, which means we have to develop more intelligent models and pull in different types of modeling other than just pure LLMs or whatever. But one other thing is that there isn't enough subject matter expertise, even in the field, to be able to do this in a really accurate manner. So things like quantifying uncertainties, that doesn't even mean something to a lot of people, and that's scary. Or another thing is, even if you look in peer-reviewed publications and you see these amazing R-squared values, and then you see how they derive the data and you realize, oh my gosh, they're overfitting, which means that the models are BS. And yet that even slips by the reviewers. So that's kind of scary, so I'm not quite sure how to solve that problem other than re-educating everybody. But there are so many pitfalls, and because everybody's rushing in to take advantage of AI, it scares me from, as I mentioned, it's all about the applications and the risk, or when it comes to human health, we can't afford to be overfitting.
Yeah.
To maybe follow on that, one of the big challenges, we can talk a lot about technical challenges, but one of the big challenges just in anything around AI and machine learning in general is this exuberance followed by, hey, that didn't live up to the hype, followed by a lack of adoption. This in AI machine learning research has happened multiple times in the past, to the point we've called them AI winters. Well before Game of Thrones, where basically huge investments in this, things didn't live up, and then a complete crash, a lack of funding, a lack of adoption, things like that. Right now we're talking, the excitement around AI has outpaced probably broad public knowledge. I mean, if I asked everyone who here can tell me what AI means, I'm willing to bet probably off the top of your, and how it's different from something like machine learning, probably a small number of people would really confidently raise their hands. And that's important because these are things that we can explain in a non-technical manner that help lower barrier to adoption and help people understand which tool is right for the right job. So even on this panel, we're talking about very distinct things like a large language model. And a large language model is something that's parsing text, and now we have multimodal ones, things that can look at images, voice, text. That's very different from something like a classifier, which is what you'd use to analyze like CT or radiographic data and make a decision, right? They have different advantages, different downfalls, different applications. And as we can just broaden this knowledge, help people understand what they're good for and what they're bad for, we can help use them in the correct way and not use them in incorrect applications.
Well said. Why don't we take the last 10 minutes for audience questions, and if there aren't any, then we can get some closing comments from the panel. Do we have any audience questions? Remember, there's no dumb question. You can ask what AI and ML is if you want. Yes, I see a hand over there. How can patients help? The question is, how can patients help? Anybody want to take that?
Well,
when you talked about the lack of data,
yeah.
How can patients help?
I'll talk about an initiative at Penn Medicine called the Penn Medicine Biobank. So this is a registry for which patients can consent to participate in a research program to make their data available for research, including training AI models. So currently at Penn Medicine, there are limits on what data is available from patients to train the model because we protect your privacy. So participants who are willing to make their data available as part of a research protocol can have a huge impact on making the models better. So far, the enrollment of the Penn Medicine Biobank is around 250,000 patients, and they've contributed electronic health record notes, genomic sequencing data, medical imaging data, et cetera. That data has been enormous for research and discovery, and it's a huge asset. That's just one way a patient can help.
Okay. Any other ideas? No?
I mean, just building off of that, the small data problem is a massive problem in machine learning in general and in bio specifically. And small data is, we know what to do if you have tremendous amounts of data. In many applications, you don't. In basically all bio applications, we run into the small data problem. So if patients are willing to include their information as data for training, that is extremely helpful. Additionally, as patients advocate for themselves about what they're comfortable and uncomfortable about with uses of AI in this space, that will help make smart, well-formed regulation.
Okay. Next question.
So for AI, a lot of talent aggregation is in San Francisco. However, for cell and gene therapy, Philadelphia is the hub. How can we find a common ground on that aspect to leverage the AI expertise that Edward was saying, like there is a gap on the application side? How can we marry those two fields here in Philly?
Go ahead.
I heard
Yeah.
the question was basically around how do you bridge the gap between innovation in tech and innovation in cell and gene therapy, because arguably some of those are housed, are decentralized in different areas of the country.
So are you talking about it from a technical standpoint in terms of the data, or more from an intellectual standpoint?
Both from an application aspect, on the
Okay.
data side. We have, I think, a lot of cell and gene therapy related companies and data is here. But then on the other side, we do have a lack of AI side of the house, or at least there is a lack of connection between those two. How can we make them more connected, and how can we process on that aspect? So, like companies like BioFi are working, you guys are working, but is there any ways we can propel that more on the cell and gene therapy side?
Yeah, so the billion-dollar question, maybe the $100 billion question, is how you get the biotechs to cooperate with each other, let alone with the software, service, tools, technology, and all other providers, in particular, in this particular instance, in AI. The convergence between tech and biotech is huge. It's an enormous opportunity, and how you get the players to participate in the same economic benefit, perhaps through a nonprofit, perhaps through public support. It sounds like you have some ideas.
I do. So, for example, there's NIMBLE, which is the biggest not-for-profit consortium in the world for, it's the National Institute of Innovation for Manufacturing Biotherapeutics. So that's a giant consortium of everything from big pharma, biotechs, CDMOs, and every, academic that's institution that's a who's who. And so that's one way of trying to get that data together. But I can tell you that even the legal wrangling that goes on to get those agreements in place is huge and very time consuming. So it's not easy. There are fundamental issues that are, more than just pure science, right? So that's one aspect. The other thing is, as many of us have discovered, the pure tech companies, they so profoundly underestimate the complexity of biology and the need for subject matter expertise that's a challenge for them. Fortunately, there are people like people here that speak both languages, so that's the critical thing. You've got to have people with subject matter expertise and people with tech expertise on the same team.
Well said.
Yeah. I think, if I could just add on,
Yeah?
I think that's exactly right. I think at least sort of when I talk to sort of most of the West Coast Silicon Valley type companies, there's an arrogance about like the AI that they're developing, and like they obviously see these use cases, and why aren't people adopting? I think you just like this conference is doing. I think you just need to get all the right people in the room. You need the subject matter expertise of the medical, the pharma. You need the end user. You need the patient to give you sort of input as to what they're going to be doing. With the physicians, you can build whatever you want for the physicians. They're not going to use it unless it sort of integrates right into their workflow, right into the EMR. You need like all these components to come together to sort of be successful. And it's not just the tech. And I think that's sort of the disparity that people have right now.
Yeah, to add on to that, the tech community often focuses a lot on, look what I can do, as opposed to identifying who the true user of this is, what do they need, and what are their pain points for adoption. In my space, I make a bunch of techniques and software to figure out if media is manipulated, and we've encountered this problem in my space. We'll give this to stakeholders in the media, in government, in the defense and intelligence community, and we'll talk about things like explainability. To me, I know exactly what these things are saying, but to that stakeholder, they don't, and they won't use it. Much of what we need to do to get adoption in this space is talk to the people who are actually using it, figure out what their pain points are, what their friction points are, and what their what's the barrier to adoption, and help bridge that last little mile. If work is not put into that space and meeting the users of this where they are, as opposed to from the tech people talking about what we want to talk about, that is one of the biggest risks of lack of adoption.
I got it. If there's no more questions, maybe we'll, oh, go ahead, yes.
One quick question. It was mentioned earlier by one of the panelists, the danger of training the AI on one certain population and then applying the results to another. So my question is, other than simply expanding the population to include the other ones in the training, what other solutions can be proposed?
I'll give one example of a solution that I have seen recently published by DeepMind. So this is a solution to this problem of distribution shift that you mentioned, where you train on one group of patients, you apply to another, and you lose performance. So one thing that can be done is to generate synthetic data that resembles the patients that you're trying to improve performance in. And this can be done using generative AI techniques. There was recently a publication in Nature Machine Intelligence from this DeepMind group showing how you could take a model that was showed good performance in adults but showed low performance in children and improve the model by including synthetic data from children and then applying it in an out-of-domain data set of children showed improved performance. So that's just one solution that I've seen recently.
Maybe if I could just offer another solution, because I think in sort of the traditional sense of machine learning, you have sort of the testing and the training, and if you don't have the same distribution, then it's like garbage in, garbage out, right? But I think what we're seeing sort of in at least in the language model space, if you get larger and larger, there are these, they call it emergent capability, but it's not emergent. It's sort of this predictable sort of capability that you're seeing. And one of them is called in-context learning in the language model, which means you don't actually have to retrain these things. And in fact, there's some work on Microsoft where as long as you give it sufficient examples within the context, it's able to generalize from just those sort of few examples. And so I think, like, again, sort of this is another example of how I think the ground is rising, where you would have to hire a computer scientist to retrain these models and do some fine tuning, but these days, like, it can generalize if you give it the right examples. And so that's a no-code solution that obviously you have to verify, but it's.
So as a biologist, I should, just to be a contrarian, there's a lot of stochasticity and variability and being extrapolating from a very small number of humans who are extremely heterogeneous could be a bit dangerous, right? It's not like just your regular kind of data set. And so I would tread very, very cautiously, and also keep in mind that machine learning and all of these data models, they can't predict where the data haven't been, right? So if they've never seen those particular patients, they can't go there because they can't extrapolate, they can interpolate. So again, tread very, very cautiously.
Yeah. Well, it's certainly an exciting time for our industry, and it's an opportunity, I think, for Philadelphia to be a #1 player in this convergence topic. So thank you all for your time, and look forward to the next panel.
Okay, so that was a fascinating conversation. Thank you, everybody. Before we move on to the break, I just want to take a moment and recognize some people. Without their work, this meeting could never have happened. So we have a steering committee. They are listed in your programs. There's about 20 people from the Philly community, all different areas of the Philly community that have been working on this meeting for almost a year to bring the content to you, to, really contribute the information. So take a look at your program. When you see them, please thank them for the time that they've volunteered to make this meeting a great one. And then obviously there's a team, it's a very small team that has to handle all of the details of a meeting like this. The women that were downstairs, Seamless, greeting you when you came in, but I want to recognize one in particular, Nancy Bocanagra. She is here in the white jacket, and she's the boss. She got everything set up yesterday. She's making sure it's all running today, and I just want to say great job and thank you. So now we get to go and explore the Innovation Hall that is just behind these curtains. And as you're doing that, I have a woman, Tracy Lessor, who's communications specialist extraordinaire, and she is covering this meeting, and she is doing a lot of social media posting today, and so I encourage you to interact with her posts on LinkedIn, but also to talk to her so she can share your comments about the meeting. So enjoy the break. We'll be back at 11. Thank you.